What happened?
Tell me.
They got sued by IBM. Until we talked to IBM.
Way to celebrate student innovation and entrepreneurship.
But let me tell you something I'm really excited about. Fits right into what you're saying. It's small because we don't have all the money in the federal government, but the Institute of Medicine and National Academy of Engineering are running for second year now a contest for university students, which we're making all the healthcare data the federal government's got available and ask them to come up with creative uses. It's fabulous. If you don't know about it, those of you from universities, look up on our website and encourage you to get a small team going. And I think we can get more thinking out of our students than we can out of our faculty, and I know that we can out of our administrators. Listen, I think we ought to open it up, and I would encourage people to ask very brief questions, very pointed if possible. So the floor is open. Yes, sir.
You talked about motivations for faculty to get involved. Has anybody done anything to change the status quo and found some success in getting rid of some disincentives and creating some incentives in that direction?
I think...
Changing comp models?
Yes. Well, one of the things that comes up repeatedly is the issue of promotion and tenure. And there's always been great ambivalence about, introducing or mandating, quote, credit for work with industry, patents, startup companies, and so forth. But I think many universities have found a way of gradually introducing the opportunity for faculty to include that kind of information in their dossier. We have actually not found that to be a significant factor because we find that the faculty who do the most tech transfer industry work tend to also get the most federal funding, have the most doctoral students. I mean, there's just a kind of success loading, so that hasn't been an issue. What I have found most significant to faculty is facilitation. Because our faculty have tremendous demands on them, they want effective systems that help them do this work. So for example, on industry research a number of years ago, we used to have a higher indirect cost rate for industry research than we did for federal research. We have a pretty generous cost-sharing program for equipment, but we wouldn't allow it for industry research. We do certain special programs to fund graduate students, but we wouldn't do it for industry programs. A number of years ago, we just eliminated that differential, and we saw a response. Faculty basically are saying, look, I have to optimize my time, my energy, so anything you can do to facilitate that would help. A few other programs we've tried that relate to comments Chuck made. We have a thing we've called instant innovation programs, where we will bring a company in for a facilitated workshop for a couple of days with a group of faculty and even graduate students, the purpose of which is to help them figure out how the university can help them solve some of their problems. And it's been very interesting because the outcome of that sometimes is a sponsored research project. Sometimes we have technology we can license to them. Sometimes it's student projects that are often extremely productive. And sometimes it's a private consultation contract with a faculty member. But what the faculty appreciate is that they have an opportunity, this is an engagement with a company where they can be creative and learn what the needs are, and there's no fixed outcome. It took a little, tricky contracting to get everyone to be happy with this. Other things, we help fund small company innovation partnerships. If a company has never worked with the university and a faculty member wants to work with them and they have a real project, we will fund half the costs, for a graduate student, it's project money. And the faculty like this because they're identifying what they're something that's of interest to them. So I think trying lots of ways to enable the faculty to do this that are not costly and that build the partnerships. One last comment, we developed a business engagement center, which has been very productive. We concentrated on one place to build relationships between faculty and industry and economic developers with a knowledgeable staff who can facilitate that interaction and create opportunity. Makes a big difference. Faculty, just like everyone else, they don't want to be bothered with a lot of extra tedium. And if you can help make those connections happen and know which faculty want to work on which topic, it really helps a great deal.
Just three very brief comments. Number one, it's sort of taken care of itself because most of the new faculty that come in are coming with the expectation of wanting to be relevant, of wanting to engage with industry, with real opportunities. Secondly, we've created something we call industrial assistantships, where the graduate student, rather than being assisting a faculty member, is actually placed in an industry working with them as part of their training, as part of their research. And thirdly, we've developed a series of bridging structures, the Research Foundation being the most active, in which we have a number of unpaid volunteer entrepreneurs that provide the bridging, provide some of the environment that gets students very excited and active. And it's the lower cost model of economic development, because most of the economic development organizations are simply after lining their own pockets rather than doing anything useful.
Any other question? And you better ask something, because I'm going to if you don't. But let's hear it. Yes, ma'am.
As I was listening to you, one of the things that really struck me about the conversation was some of the sectors that you pointed out: education, medical. And the thing that strikes me about those two is that they're marked by the presence of both a high number of businesses, but also a high level of nonprofits. That in these areas you have the interesting sort of intersection of social and economic innovation. And so I sort of put to the panel, to what degree are we now using sort of university resources to also stimulate social innovation? Because this is going to be another area where we're going to see some of the answers and the ability to really address some of the more complex problems that intersect all sectors.
I'll start, Sherry. First of all, it's interesting that those two are the two remaining visually industrial or business clusters that have yet to see any meaningful degrees of productivity increases. To Aneesh's point earlier, what I'm hoping we're going to see more and more in these two sectors is evidence-based education, evidence-based medicines. As he remarked, certainly the availability of certain kinds of tools, such as the electronic records, or the kinds of things that Atul Gawande talks about, and the checklist that like the pilots use. But it really does help if you actually know what the evidence is, rather than assume that you do. And clearly, education is the one area where everybody thinks they're an expert, but has never read a piece of research data on that. So I'm very excited about that, and clearly we're seeing a good bit of that, and I'm sure Aneesh may have some other comments. But
well, the only other part I'd make is that these are massive growth markets globally. Here is the anxiety that I share inside our White House team. I say, look, today, only 10% of the world's population that's diagnosed as needing a heart surgery get it, ish. I don't know what the US average price point is, depending on charges versus rates, but let's assume it's a $50,000 product. I just came back from India about 3 weeks ago, where Dr. Devashetty presented a vision. He's already profitable at a $2,000 heart surgery, and he's moving it down to $800. And he's asking the University of Minnesota to partner with him to transfer the knowledge around how to train nurse anesthetists. This is one of the last areas of his cost structure that he can't optimize. Education is the exact same boat. When the president visited India, we were communicating via broadband to a remote village that had no indoor plumbing and no infrastructure whatsoever. Yet that village had a gigabit fiber connection and a 4G WiMAX tower, which is going to be made available to all 250,000 villages in India over the next 3 years. And that community is asking the question, for the kids that are looking for primary school education in K-12, do they have the time to build physical buildings and to hire all the teachers to get the students trained? No, they're going to invent some mobile digital tutor that allow you to be knowledgeable about X, Y, or Z subject to then find employment in a growth market, and they're going to get better and better at it. And the dilemma I pose in health and education is, will the US be exporters of the innovations that will meet the needs of these global markets? Or will they completely leapfrog us in thinking about breakthroughs and basically put us in a position of importing those solutions to hit the holes that we have in our communities? And that's why I'm so bullish on the value-driven engineering program that we funded under an EDA I-6 innovation grant in Ohio, in large part because it's regional. It wouldn't just be Akron, but they're thinking about how American ingenuity can tap into these global markets. And I believe it's not a social innovation question of doing good without a bottom line. These are profitable ventures, just have a different frugal engineering approach. And that, to me, if you go forward about the role of the university in a global context, all your students come from over the world, they'll tell you the problems. My favorite collaboration, again, I'll go finalize with India, I just came back. Stanford, India, biodesign. Stanford's got this textbook they wrote on biodesign. And they Skype into the kids in India who have formed teams of the business school, the med school, and the engineering school. They come together, and they literally are prototyping based on advice and mentorship and lecture from Stanford faculty, who, by the way, don't get any money for this, because no one pays for this, but they do it because they care about it. And they're literally launching a dozen startups in India because Stanford faculty are training and mentoring them on how to create $10 substitutes for $5,000 things in the US. And that kind of creativity and ingenuity, I believe, needs to happen in our neighborhoods and our communities. That's why I'm so bullish on the Akron program, not to pick on just one of the thing, but that is hope that the university is saying, we see a future in this, in lower cost, higher value health, and similar, mastery versus seat time in learning. That's my
just two quick comments about that, Aneesh. One is thanking Ariana Murdy at Harvard and I have worked to establish a very informal little dialogue between higher education leaders in the U.S. and in India.
Yes, sir.
And the reason, at least from my point of view, is very simple. I think that what has to be done in India to meet this scale challenge, I mean, you can't, they are talking about 800 to 1,000 new universities over decades.
Exactly.
You can't even think about it. Makes your head hurt. But I think the way they have to think about scale has got to map very closely to how we have to think about productivity and getting our costs down. So I think we can. It's a two-way street learning. And the second thing is, just as an engineer or a has-been engineer or something, the area of low-cost medical technology.
Amen.
I mean, man, if I were a young faculty member, that is a field that it could be so exciting, that could play into regional economic development, and do all of the above, and talk about challenge, and talk about something that needs deep intellectual input, but real practical output. That's it. There's so much to be done, Marvin.